Welcome to Basket Lodge. My name is Peter Dudek and I organize these events. They're all based on nature, history, culture. Thank you. A round of applause for Michael Kellett.
Thank you, everyone. Glad to be here, and I'm going to try not to talk the whole time so that we can have questions if anyone has any. I work for a conservation group, Restore the North Woods, where we started in Concord, Mass. We have an office in Maine. If anyone's interested in joining, I have a few brochures here, membership brochures. Also, we've been involved in the Maine woods, trying to create a big national park in northern Maine, which led to a national monument that was created by President Obama in 2016. If you're interested in the brochure that talks about the big park idea, then I have some of those too. So feel free to pick either up. And also, if you're interested in being on our email list just for information and what you can do to help and so forth, please sign up here. So I'll just leave them here since no one's sitting in front of the row. So I'm going to talk about saving Massachusetts forests. I've been mainly involved in actually Maine forests for the last 25 years or so. We got involved there because to us it's obviously the biggest chunk of forest in New England, and also it was the most endangered in terms of large-scale clear cutting and all kinds of nasty stuff, and it's still happening, but I think we really raised a lot of public consciousness in Maine about forests, because when we first started in the late 80s, people said, oh, they're taking good care of it, aren't they? They're Great Northern is here to stay, aren't they? They've been here for 100 years. Well, they're gone. All of it's been sold. There's all kinds of clear cutting and selling it off for development and so forth. But a lot of other people have taken up that charge, and we're a small group, we can't do everything. So what we're trying to focus on is leveraging information and activism to get the broader public involved. And so then we start looking back at Massachusetts, and we're going, actually there's a lot to save in Massachusetts forests, and we're not doing a very good job of protecting them. And as I talked to more and more people, I was involved in the Walden Woods issue, so I knew a lot of people were involved in Walden Woods. But we started realizing there are a lot of people out there who really care about doing something to protect our forests, not just worrying about not so good things that are happening. And I'm going to talk about some of the not so good things that are happening and why the forests are really important, Massachusetts forests, and what we might do about that. So why are they important? Forests fight climate change because they absorb and they store carbon, which would otherwise fuel climate change. They protect and restore biodiversity. As they grow back, they get more and more toward an old growth stage where they can support a lot of sensitive species that are not around in younger forests, which are what most of our forests are. And they provide a lot of public benefits, clean air, water, etc. So they're good for on all three fronts. They're really important. Climate change, as I mentioned, there's more and more concern about protecting forests for climate change because, as you probably know, it's a huge emergency, and we got an all hands on deck approach is needed because we're talking about reducing emissions from fossil fuels, but that's not going to be enough alone unless we absorb some of the carbon that's already out there, and that's what forests do. If we don't cut them down, as they get older, they absorb even more carbon. Massachusetts has done nothing to protect forests to reduce fossil fuel emissions. Nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing the state has done is to promote cutting forests down and burning them for biomass energy, which they claimed was good for climate change. Now science is showing it's totally bunk, and they're having a harder and harder time defending it, but it's still a real threat. Biodiversity, again, I won't get into great detail, but we're facing a global extinction crisis. Like the last one on this to this extent was when the dinosaurs went extinct. Scientists like E.O. Wilson and others say we need to save 50% of the planet for nature, not exploited and not cut and mined and so forth. The very least, which the UN has talked about, is 17%. Only 6% of the lower 48 U.S. states are protected in that, based on those criteria for a nature reserve. If you add Alaska, it's about 12%, 10%. Only 1.2% of Massachusetts lands have permanent protection, and those are federal lands because they have statutory federal protection. So we need a lot more, to even come to the minimum amount talked about by scientists, we need a huge expansion of protected lands in Massachusetts. And this is the highest density population in the United States is in the Northeast, as you probably know, but we have only one full national park, Acadia. We have some smaller national park areas like Cape Cod, which are beautiful, but put them all together, it's not very large. And they get millions of visitors because we don't have very many. Almost all the rest of the landscape is open to development, logging, farming, other things. Not necessarily all bad things, but we need some places, a lot more places, that don't have any extractive industry going on. And especially within reach of large population centers, because we're learning that nature is really important for mental health, for physical health, for people to get out into natural areas is super important. We don't have enough of them. The good thing is Massachusetts has a lot of potential. The dark green are called core habitats by the state government. The study that was done, Biomass Map 2, the lighter green are mainly either other public lands or conservation lands or lands that are just de facto not being logged or developed. Most of these are not permanently protected, but 63% of the state is forested. So there's a huge amount of potential for if we protect these forests. And we have a significant amount of public land. We have about 650,000 acres of state land, about 30,000 acres or something of federal land, mostly Cape Cod National Seashore. But that's 13% of the land base, so if all of these public lands were protected, that would get us pretty close to 17%. If we protected some marine areas, we could go well over 17%. We have no fully preserved marine areas that don't allow any kind of extraction. And we have some of the densest forests in terms of biomass, i.e. the ability to store and absorb carbon in the United States. So if you look here's Massachusetts. The green, this green is the highest density forest in terms of carbon storage. We're right in the core of one of the largest areas. The Pacific Northwest, of course, is these giant trees, redwoods, and ancient forests. They have the most capability. But next to those, basically, we've got the next amount. And this purple is where is the lower amount of carbon storage, and a lot of it is in the southeast where they're just mowing down forests for biomass energy, where there's large corporate ownerships. They don't have much protection, just like here. And the same with the upper Midwest. They're just demolishing forests all over the place.
What are the white areas?
I'm sorry?
What are the white areas?
Those are areas with no significant amount of forest. Sorry, good question. The trouble is Massachusetts is heading in the opposite direction on all of these things. This is Windsor State Forest. We are basically acting as if forests, we're treating forests the way we did in the 19th century, basically as a resource to be extracted and used for people. And it's as if climate change and biodiversity and extinction and the need of more and more people don't even exist in terms of public policy in Massachusetts on forests. Most states state forest lands are managed as industrial timberlands. They're logged for various reasons. We have this, as I mentioned, biomass is being promoted by the state. There's this alternative portfolio standard, which I won't go into detail, but it basically provides subsidies for cutting down and burning trees for energy. There's a project called the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership, which basically buys into the same utilitarian extractive mentality, and that would be subsidized by the public. And there's a new push. They're always looking for new ways to create more demand to cut trees down, and now it's wooden buildings with CLT, cross-laminated timber, which is basically plywood, but they jazzed it up, and now they call it climate friendly. There are other public policies degrading forests, wind, solar, pipelines, other things that are being approved on either state lands, private lands, municipal lands. Private landowners, most private landowners actually don't want to log their forests based on public opinion surveys, but when they talk to foresters or the state about tax incentives and so forth, they're urged to log their forests. And a lot of people don't want to, but there's nobody going, gee, you know, it would be really good for you to protect your forest and keep it intact for climate change. And there's little effort going on to recycle paper. You don't hear anything about paper recycling, wood recycling. It's pathetically ignored right now, but that would reduce the amount of logging that we have to do if we did more of that. And then, as I mentioned, hardly any of the state is permanently protected under law, 1.2% federal. State lands, there's a reserve system that takes about 29% of state lands, but it's totally administrative. It could be totally reversed tomorrow at the stroke of a pen. There's no legal mandate. You can't sue them if they do something that doesn't seem appropriate. So it's not really permanent protection. It's temporary protection. And most towns there are a lot of municipal and town forests. Many of them are being logged. A few are not, but and a few have really strong local protection, but that's actually not the standard. The problem is we got this myth about managed forests. So managed forests are better than just leaving the forest alone as a natural forest. And this goes back not to 1491, but goes back to the 18th century or 19th century. And so the question is, which working forest is better for the future? The working forest before we started messing around with it, or the working forest the way it is today and the way it's going? Oops, what happened there? I think that was a cut and paste problem. I can tell you what that says on the web. You get double clear cuts here. One of the biggest myths is that logging promotes healthy forests. And the forests need to be logged, they need to be weeded like a garden. And without human management, they're going to get decadent, they're going to have disease, insect infestations are going to blow down, and they're going to be too crowded, and there's not going to be diverse wildlife. That's all total bunk. That's totally not true. That's sort of folk forestry based going back to the 1800s, before there was real science that showed this is all not true. The reality is protecting forests and leaving them alone is the best way we can promote healthy forests. Another one is that logging is sustainable, that we've learned our lesson from the past and now the logging we're doing is all sustainable. The reality is there's no definition for sustainability. There's no legal standard. It's totally meaningless. It means nothing. There's no science behind it. There's no law behind it. It's just, oh, it's sustainable. Oh, yeah, it's sustainable. Oh, yeah, trust us. And the reality is that Massachusetts has weak forestry regulations just like every other state. They're unbelievably weak. They have no standard. Basically, you can't just totally trash the entire watershed. And as has been pointed out by climate experts who care about forests, is that we have, they talk about Well, we don't cut any more than grows, so that's sustainable. Well, the reality is we've only got 50% of the biomass in our forests that we did in 1491 because we mowed almost all of them down until relatively recently when they started to grow back, and now we've got about 50% of what we used to have, so we're still 50% short on biomass. So anything you cut down is just adding to the deficit. Now, we're not going to get back to 100% in what we had in 1620, but we could have a lot more than 50% if we let them grow back. But we're not doing that, at least not in an organized fashion. Another total myth is logging improves wildlife habitat. We need to log, we need more young forests, we're losing all the young forests, and we got to do clear cutting because wildlife need early successional habitats, and we're losing birds and species, they're declining and so forth. Well, the reality is there are no threatened or endangered species that need logging to survive, none. This is just, it's an anthropocentric, oh gee, I like that kind of bird, and gee, they're declining, so we need more habitat for my favorite bird. Well, I like birds too, but the reality is old growth forests also provide bird habitat, and there aren't very many of those. The reality is that we have a grossly inflated amount of young forests today because we still have a lot of remnants from when it was all mowed down. The natural forest in 1491 was about 5 or 8% openings. Now it's about 15, 20% openings, and they say that we need more. We need more openings and more young forests. The reality is the forest used to be, there was the old saw about how a squirrel could get on a tree in Maine and go all the way to the Great Plains and never touch the ground. And actually there was a lot of truth in that. Most of Massachusetts was covered with dense forest, but it had openings, natural openings. You had blowdowns, you had windstorms, you had disease, you had insects, you had ice storms and so forth. So there were natural openings in a natural forest. So species that need young forests have plenty of space, and they will because of the natural forest. Another one is logging discourages development, and that map, it looks fine here, but this is the glitches of modern technology. That's a map from Mass Audubon. One of the arguments is we need to encourage landowners to log their land because that gives them a financial incentive not to sell it off for development. And if they won't have that cash flow, they may sell it off and turn it into Walmart or something. And this map from Mass Audubon, here the eastern part of this, the darker colors are more development. So you can see Eastern Mass has a lot of development, and the Connecticut River Valley has quite a bit. Western Mass and Central Mass have, this is development, the amount of development in the last 20 years. There's very little development pressure other than, in a few hot spots. And that's serious, that's a real issue. The reality is that most of these areas where logging is going on is in those white areas where there's no development pressure hardly. So what's the threat where we need to log the forest? There's no study that shows in any event that promoting logging on private land prevents people. You can make big bucks if you're in an area that's going to be developed, selling your land for development. If you want money, if that's your main goal, you're going to make nothing from cutting your timber compared to selling it for some subdivision. So it's just not, there's no evidence that this is true. Another one is logging fights climate change, actually. This is another myth, which is that young trees grow faster than old trees, and they suck up more carbon. So actually replacing decadent old trees with hardy, fast-growing young trees is going to suck up all that carbon, and you're going to end up ahead of the game. The reality is old trees absorb more carbon and store more carbon, and they can live hundreds of years. So cutting down even a mature forest, not just an old-growth forest, you're automatically freeing up almost all the carbon in that forest within a few years, and it's going to take a century or more to recover that carbon when the forest grows back. So this is totally bogus. Another one is, I mentioned, cutting down trees and burning them for energy is supposedly good for climate change because the trees grow back. So you're cutting down the tree and burning it, but then new trees grow back and they absorb all that carbon, which is great if you have 200 years to wait for the carbon to get reabsorbed, and you're going to make sure that the forest doesn't get mowed, cut again, or turned into a parking lot or whatever, none of which can be assured. So the reality is this is totally bogus. This is being, unfortunately, this myth has created enough credibility that Europe is buying wood from the southeast, huge amounts, and burning it in the EU and claiming it's carbon neutral and getting credit for fighting climate change. It's a totally bogus thing. It's being exposed, and in a few years people will catch on, but in the meantime they're doing huge damage to forests. Another one which I mentioned is cross-laminated timber. Well, let's build skyscrapers out of wood. And I love wood. Wood is beautiful. We live in a wood home that was built in 1760. I think wood's great. But unfortunately, we're facing a climate crisis, and we got to address that. That's the overwhelming importance here. The reality is, wood buildings. What happens is when you log, about 80% of the carbon in the forest is gone within a few years. A lot of it is gone within a few days because it ends up being burned as waste once it gets to a mill, if it gets to a mill. A lot of it turns out to be biomass burned for energy. But the reality is trees live hundreds of years. About 6.2% of US houses are older than 100 years. Trees can live hundreds of years. So it's totally bogus to say that these buildings are going to be there for hundreds of years, because that's not. If you've ever watched flipper shows on TV, house flipper shows, what do? They get a house, they tear out all the interior, all the cabinets, they ship them out, guess where they go? They get burned in an energy plant somewhere. That's what we do with wood. So this is totally bogus. The other one is, well, we need to log here because we're using all this wood, we're using way more wood than we're producing, and in the meantime, we're cutting down all these tropical forests, and we need, we do a better job here, so if we cut more trees here and use them, that would relieve pressure on other countries. Well, the reality is, most of our wood comes from Canada, Europe, other countries that have the same kind of logging that we do, if not better standards. Most of the tropical forests are cut down for oil palm plantations and to create grazing for cattle and so forth, and for small farmers who slash and burn. That wood, very little of that wood ends up coming over here and being used by people in Massachusetts. So it's totally, it sounds great, but in reality this doesn't solve any problem. It just cuts more trees down in Massachusetts. Another one is we create a bunch of jobs if we did more logging. Well, the reality is the Maine, which is the most forested state in the Union, has subsidized and promoted logging forever. The governor, the legislature are totally in the pocket of the forest industry. They do everything to make it, to grease the skids for the forest industry. In reality, jobs in the forest jobs in Maine are plummeting. They've just dropped like a stone. All kinds of mills have closed. There are virtually no sawmills left. Well, almost all the big paper mills are gone. The companies that the timber companies have pretty much gotten out and sold off to real estate investment companies that now are selling off lake shores for development. So that's a total bust. And so to talk about putting any faith in logging is to renew the economy is totally misguided, and it's based on no good information. So the reality is, are we going to there? And there's a great northern paper mill in Millinocket, and everybody kept saying, "Oh, it's been here 100 years. It'll come back. It'll come. Oh, don't worry, it'll be back." And they kept saying that until they blew up that big chimney. That's totally gone now. There is no paper mill in Millinocket. That was why the town was built, was for this paper mill. And Tom Power, who's an economist in the West, has studied this for years, and he talks about looking and he's talking about rural economies, looking through the rearview mirror and how that's the way most people tend to look at it. They say, oh, well, remember the great old days when we had ranching and logging and mining and whatever, but the reality is that we need to look through the windshield because the real economic growth is coming from people who are entrepreneurs, who use the internet for their business, who move to a place because it's beautiful. I always tell people Bozeman, Montana is one of the fastest growing cities in the West. I don't know if you've been to Bozeman. Bozeman, it's not because there's a lot of ranching, it's not because there's a lot of mining, it's not because there's a lot of grazing, it's not because there's a lot of logging, it's because it's 40 miles from Yellowstone National Park. That's why it's growing. And businesses are moving there, all the conservation groups are there, so it's seen as this green community. They've got, and it's got problems, of course, as communities have, but they certainly don't have economic problems. Meanwhile, a lot of the towns that still depend on logging and mining and so forth are doing terribly in the West and all across the country, including in northern Maine. Excuse me. So, here are some solutions as to how we can address the problem in Massachusetts. We should end all subsidies for any biomass energy. It's crazy, it makes no sense. We should pass a law that basically bans any subsidies going to the industry. It could be pretty simple, and there's no scientific basis for it. It's totally political. It's driven by a few companies and their minions in various places who are going along with it. We should promote green energy, but it needs to be properly done and really be green, not fake green energy. We should reject the Mohawk Trail Partnership. We should help private landowners to keep their forest in. We should increase recycling, designate some new preserves, and even think about new national parks. So as I said, we have these public subsidized for burning trees. That's crazy. We should pass a law to get rid of this. We should do something to stop putting wind power and solar energy facilities in places that are naturally important and intact ecosystems and so forth in mountaintops and stuff. Right now each town is sort of on its own. There's no state guidance really on this. It's crazy. People are really unhappy about it whenever it's done to their town, yet there's no leadership on this issue. That could be done. In the meantime, we should be promoting solar that's properly sited, wind if we can find proper siting for it. It's a problem in Massachusetts, the heat pumps and so forth. So we should be promoting those things. The state is not doing a whole lot. I mentioned this partnership. There's legislation that's in the legislature right now, which may include this as a part of a big bill. We don't know, which would be subsidized by the public, by us. And it's basically the rearview mirror approach. It's like, let's go to the good old days of logging and let's burn wood for energy. It worked for the cavemen, it ought to work for us. And that's the approach. We need to do something. There are a lot of landowners, as I mentioned, who really don't want to cut their forests. They'd like to just keep them intact, but economically, it can be, you have taxes and so forth. We ought to have programs to help people. There are tax abatement programs, but that's only a partial help, and that's not really permanent. So we ought to think about some kind of state program to permanently help people protect their lands, either through easements or other ways. We should increase recycling. I'll just note on this, it's hard to read, but only 46% of paper and cardboard is recycled or diverted in Massachusetts. You would think it would be way more. It's not. And wood, it's only 21% is reused or recycled. All the rest, almost all of that is burned. Some of it's landfilled, which ends up turning into methane, which worsens climate change. So either way, it's bad. Well, it's crazy to be logging state forests. It loses money, we spend millions of dollars to do it, and the money that we get back is way less than what we pay all the staff and the infrastructure and the facilities and the road upkeep and all that stuff is way less than what we get in money back. That doesn't even count the fact that there are all kinds of other values to keeping forests intact. It really makes zero sense. There's no need for that timber. There's not so little demand that it ends up going up to Canada, much of it, because they don't need to do it here because they can't get enough money here. Canada is buying stuff in large scale, and nobody wants to build sawmills in Massachusetts because it's not a money-making venture. In Canada, it's subsidized, so they can get away with it, or they wouldn't be doing it either. We should change the mandate of the state land agencies to be preservation rather than resource extraction and manipulation. And there are a lot of good people working in these agencies, and they can be reoriented toward protection rather than the current resource extraction. And we should also encourage municipalities and counties. There are about 300,000 acres of town and city lands, many of them in watersheds that could be protected. And there should be some program to encourage them. We don't want to tell them what to do, but my guess is a lot of them would be open to thinking about it if this was made a bigger issue. My town, they just did some logging in one of the state forests. And why did they do it? For forest health. That's why they did it. And these guys, they meant well, they thought they were helping the forest. Instead, they're logging it. And in national parks, if we really want to help the economy here, the biggest positive thing in the economy of Maine in recent years has been this national monument that was created in the proposed park that we proposed. And national monument is similar to a national park. It gets national attention. People come from all over. The local towns have seen the amount of tourism double since that was designated. Their real estate, which was in the rock bottom, you could buy a really nice house in Millinocket for $40,000. Real estate is starting to go back up slowly. People are starting to feel good about the town. Businesses are doing better. We really ought to think about we've got a lot of state land. We could create a couple national parks in Massachusetts by combining these into a single unit, a couple different single units. And this would bring national attention, it would bring more money. The state doesn't have money to manage the state parks and recreation. It would be much easier to get philanthropists to put money up to buy land and protect it if they were helping to protect a national park. This has been shown all over the country. So anyway, that's a whole other talk, but this really deserves consideration. The question is, this is Peru Wildlife Management Area. This was done for wildlife habitat. This is because we're losing these early successional species. I don't know what's going to live in that anytime soon, but it's probably invasive species that are going to be living there. Do we really want more of that, or do we want protection? Do we want to let the forest grow back, keep what we have, and expand on that, allow the forest to grow back, value them as ecosystems and beautiful places and recreational areas, and a part of a truly sustainable economy? So that's it. And if you want to help or you want to get involved, as I say, I've got things you can sign up. I've got information I'm welcome you to take, and that's my information. So. I think we have about 15 minutes, do we?
Yeah, we can have some questions. And actually, I have one. To promote the talk, I posted on Facebook, and within 20 minutes, a logger responded, "Well, the state needs to start managing their forests by harvesting their timber, see how well your garden grows without weeding it." I imagine this is something you hear on a regular basis.
It is. It really is a folk forestry thing. It's like, it's like your grandma told you to put cold compress on some ailment that it didn't work, but everybody thought it worked. And that's not based on any science. It's not based on any, the reality is our forests are basically a huge uncontrolled experiment. What we did is we came over here, mowed it all down, and then when there was hardly anything left, we began to say, oh geez, maybe there have some value other than just cutting them down. And when we got to the west, there was enough of second thought that we started saving some stuff. But the east, it was too late. And so then, of course, we had the people saying, well, it's already been cut, so why not just keep cutting? It's just, it's all human controlled and so forth. But now we're learning that actually forests that have grown back they're not the same as the original old growth, but they can be close to it. And they offer a huge amount of diversity that are not like a garden at all. That's totally bogus. Now, if your concern is only to grow trees as wood, and grow them fast, grow them straight, and cut them down for wood, that mentality makes sense. So if you're a corporate forester on some, timberland that has no bones about being natural, even that though, it actually good for the foresters I've talked to who really do what I call I think is good forestry. Even they are very careful. They don't consider it like weeding. They consider it to be, well, I'm going to do as little damage as I can do because everything I do is going to damage it, but I'll do as little as possible. Yes?
Why did the older growth forests in the west show up as bigger carbon sinks then? Like along the Rockies, besides the Pacific Northwest, the other ones didn't really absorb a lot of carbon?
In the Rockies, a lot of those forests, it's very dry. The soils are not loamy like ours. It's cold. It's high elevation. So the trees really have to struggle to get along. So they don't get as big. They aren't able to absorb as much. They don't live as long a lot of times because there's fire. They have a regime that has natural fires every 100 years or 50 years or whatever. So they just don't have the opportunity to grow as long or get as big. So that's why. Although they still store a lot, and part of the problem is a lot of them have been logged over too. So if you look at those Rocky Mountain forests, they've been heavily logged.
Would the opportunity be there in the Midwest if it wasn't all agricultural land?
Well, the upper Midwest, northern Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, they're dense. They're just like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Western Mass. They have very similar ecosystems as northern Maine. They're having the same problem we are. They're logging them like crazy. And if those forests were allowed to grow back, they would be very similar in density to ours. What happened is they started here, did all the logging, started in Maine, worked their way across. A lot of the companies that are in the West started out in the Northeast and they mowed it all down and then they said, oh, we gotta go some. Then they went to the Midwest, mowed that all down. Then they ended up in the West. Now the Northeast has been able to grow back to a great extent over 100 plus years. The Midwest is starting to do the same thing. It's not as far along. So it's a combination of the trees aren't as big in many places and now they're cutting like crazy in those places. Yes?
At the same time, we're watching a whole bunch of insects and blights come in that never were around.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on the cusp of woolly adelgid moving into our town. And we've had a blight hitting the beech trees that rots. They're all, when you cut one, it's punky. Most of it's rotten. And of course, emerald ash borer, there's so many things. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like the assault is across the board. I find that really discouraging to watch. And I don't know what the answer to it is. I mean, it doesn't seem like spraying is any answer. And you just watch the species disappear. What do you think about that issue?
Well, there are a couple levels of that. So if you have, a hemlock tree in your backyard and you don't want to lose it, You may need to use one of those pesticides you pour around the trunk or whatever just to save that tree. That has issues, other issues, but it's not practical to do over large areas, as you say. The other thing is that in cities, it's the same thing, where sometimes they planted a lot of the same species of trees. In fact, they come from the same lot of trees, so genetically they're probably similar. And they sometimes will cut down disease trees to try to limit the spread of disease in the city. And those have some legitimacy. I mean, and plus you don't want trees falling on people in campgrounds and so forth. So those are, it's not like there's never a case where ever cutting a tree in that situation makes sense. However, in a natural forest, the reality is those diseases are not as prevalent in natural. Large blocks of natural forest are more resistant to insects, disease, invasives. They have a much more complex ecosystem. The species are more diverse in terms of their genetics and so forth, so they're more able to resist disease. So you'll have some trees die, but you basically don't lose at all. And in fact, one of the interesting things that's being done now is they're looking at some of these species. They're looking at trees that survived when a bunch of other ones died, and they're looking at why is that tree different, and they're beginning to realize that a certain proportion of trees are naturally resistant. They think now with the chestnut, people go, oh my God, look at the chestnut, they all got wiped out. The reality is what happened is as soon as they started dying in large amounts, they just mowed them all down. They cut them all down because they said, oh, we can't lose all that timber. They're all going to die anyway. So we really don't know if we wiped out 5% of chestnuts that might have survived. We don't know. And they've done some with the emerald ash borer where they're finding that some trees take some damage, but they live and survive. Well, then they can reproduce. And so, yes, you can get a lot of damage, but if you have a natural forest, it's way more resilient. What happens is humans don't know anything. You look at these trees, you can't tell if it's resistant or not. You have no idea. So you just say, oh yeah, I can't take any chances. Let's cut them down. So anyway, it's a real issue, and obviously it was created by humans, so it's not like you're dealing with an untouched wilderness. But logging doesn't solve the problem. You just take the trees out, and then you still have the diseases. It doesn't go away.
What do you feel about this, the crossbreeding with for instance, Chinese chestnut with American chestnut, and the Liberty elm attempts to grow an elm that's blight resistant? Do you see that as a positive step?
I think it's a mixed bag. I'm not thrilled about that really, but it's a tough call. They're not talking about maybe using GMOs trees. That I think is a really bad idea. I think as long as you're crossbreeding natural species, then if it doesn't work, it's not like you're going to have it take over the planet and create mix with the native species and screw everything up like you could with GMOs. I think there was did you have a question?
I did. Well, actually a comment. A good example of a good reason not to cut down all the disease trees is the American beech. We're finding more and more that there are beeches within those disease forests that actually have natural immunity. So if you actually leave those forests alone, eventually that immunity will in fact revive that forest. So just to throw that out.
Glad to hear confirmation of that. Because I've been reading it. There's not a whole lot out there yet, but it's kind of a new thing.
But there is more information, more scientific, I think, validation taking place on that. So I think if we're just patient, instead of just, as you say, mowing all the beech forests down to justify a logging project, I think that we'll find that natural selection and immunities will actually save the day.
Yeah. Yes.
Michael, you talk about the obvious downside of biomass burning and the shortcomings of solar and wind energy. Let me bring up, you didn't mention nuclear energy, which is a boogeyman to a lot of folks, but there's been a lot of change and development in nuclear energy that most folks are not aware of, and it could represent a zero carbon asset to replace coal and fossil fuel and all that. That's the subject of another lecture, but it's something to consider.
Well, I've paid a fair amount of attention over the years to the nuclear energy world, and with climate change, I think you can't totally take anything off the table, but it's got so many problems in terms of waste, getting rid of waste, and uranium mining is a horrible, nasty thing. But I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't totally throw it out the windows if it can be shown that there's new small ones, that it's a trade-off, and it's, in the short term, it's, who knows?
I think you'll see some new possibilities opening up within the next couple of years.
But I didn't mean, the thing is, I didn't mean to diss solar, and I think wind it's except offshore, and even there are a lot of problems, but solar, I think solar is really the key thing. You can't do it all, it's not going to happen instantly, which is why I think other approaches need to be at least considered if they really are low carbon, unlike biomass. But solar, I mean, there have been calculations, if every house and building had solar collectors, we probably would solve most of the energy problem. Not going to happen tomorrow, but I mean, that's the best solution, I think. That doesn't mean there aren't other ones to think about.
I know that you've been working on this. What if this area were to have a national park? What would that look like, and what are the steps needed to get that going, especially in the era of Trump?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I think national parks are a good idea is because just because there are politicians in office who are not environmentally aware doesn't mean you can't overcome that with enough people power. And the reality is, in the past, it hasn't been as bad as now, but there have been periods in the past where there have been pretty bad Congresses. And for example, when the Alaska Lands Act was passed in 1980, the Congress was not very friendly, and it only passed by like one vote in the end. It was barely scraped by, and Reagan was coming into office. They knew that if he got in, he was going to veto anything. But they created a national campaign, and all of a sudden these areas in Alaska, all the Alaska politicians hated the idea, they all opposed it, but people love national parks. They doubled the size of the national park system in one bill. The national parks are the most popular type of land designation anywhere. We have about 330 million visitors to national parks each year. That's equivalent to the whole US population. Now those aren't individuals, they're probably maybe 50 million individuals. Imagine if you had 1% of those people who voted with their feet to go to national parks with their kids and loved it, to do so, to help create national parks. And right now, if you're going to talk about protecting lands within a state, somebody in California is not going to do much to help us protect forests in Massachusetts. They're going to go, that's nice, what does that have to do with me? If you're talking about a national park, all of a sudden you can get people in New York, you get people in Boston, you can get people all over the country, and you got to pass a bill in Congress to do it. But tougher things have happened before. I think what we need to do is we're working on a nationwide coalition to put together a bunch of proposals all around the country, because there are a lot of groups talking about parks. Then we have a national campaign like the Alaska Lands Act. And what you have to do is you have a bill. You can do what are called omnibus bills, which you can put a bunch of different pieces in from all over the country. That's what they did with Alaska. They had dozens and dozens of parks and refuges and wilderness and rivers in this giant bill. Well, what it does is it creates, then all of a sudden you got a member of Congress in Oregon, you got one in Michigan, you got one in Massachusetts. They all like their area in the bill, and the more to them, great, if we create more in California, so much the better. So, and the thing is, it takes a number of years. I mean, it took 25 years to create this monument in Maine. I don't think it would take as long here because we had overwhelming political opposition in Maine. And as I said, you have the whole working forest mentality in Maine that people still think we can somehow do this and it's going to work.
What about the Berkshire area? You had talked about how it's similar to Acadia, and that because it's going around towns and...
Well, people think that, again, I could do a whole talk on it, but the people think that, number one, that all the qualified areas have been designated as a national park. Yellowstone, Yosemite, and there's not really no amazing places left. So, number one, there's nothing really that great to designate. Another thing is, well, you got to have a big area like Yellowstone that's just all public land, no people, you just draw the line, bam, it's done. The reality is, we don't have a perfect world anymore. We're dealing with what we have to work with. And in fact, national parks in the east have not been created that way. Acadia is a good example. Acadia was the first national park in the eastern United States. And that was started by a generous guy who owned land on Mount Desert Island, and he said, this should be a national park, and he donated it to the federal government. The Secretary of the Interior accepted it, the President signed, made it a national monument, just like the new one in Maine. And then later, like 5 years later, they passed legislation to make it a national park, and it was created by people donating land. And it was only like, what was it, 1990 when they passed legislation that allowed the federal government to actually buy land within Acadia Park. So if you've been to Acadia, all that land in the park was donated by private individuals who wanted it to be protected as a part of the park. And if you also look at a map of it, it's patchy. So you got Park, Southwest Harbor, Park, Bar Harbor, you got, all these separate pieces. Well, you could do that. They did that actually in Texas with Big Thicket National Preserve, which is, if you see a map, it's in East Texas, really diverse, the Big Thicket, super biodiverse area, but most of it was sold off, logged, whatever. And they created a national preserve which allows hunting and a few other uses that are not allowed in a national park. So you can have a national park and preserve to allow things like hunting. But anyway, if you look at a map, it's like blobs connected with rivers. It's about a 1 million acre area, but it's only less than 100,000 acres of park. So that's what a Berkshire National Park would look like. It would be, I even created a map, I don't have it here, but where I overlay, I have the two side by side on the same scale. And it's actually pretty similar scale, Western Mass to Eastern Texas. And if you looked at all the existing state lands in Western Mass, it's about 175,000 acres, which is bigger than Big Thicket National Preserve. It would actually be one of the bigger national parks. I think the 19th biggest national park out of 59. So it'd be bigger than Acadia, Bryce Canyon, Wayne Cave, a lot of the famous Zion. So anyway, it could be done with strictly on state land. The state would have to convey the land. It's been done in other places. Shenandoah National Park and Great Smoky Mountain National Park, that was all done by the states. And then they donated it to the federal government. Big Bend National Park, same thing. The state of Texas, believe it or not, wanted a national park, and they bought all this ranch land, donated it to be a national park. So it's totally doable. And the other thing is the Berkshires, the Quabbin is the biggest tract of intact forest in southern New England. It's the biggest piece. This would be bigger than many national parks if you've made that a wilderness national park. In the Berkshires, you've got not only diverse natural areas, which are not well protected in general. So we got whole ecosystems that really don't have much permanent protection. But you've also got all the cultural and historic sites and tradition. It's like 100 and some odd National Historic Registry sites. There's no national park that has this mix. This would be a totally unique park. And, and they've broken the mold before. For example, Everglades, they said, oh, you don't have a mountain, you don't have a huge canyon, you don't have giant waterfalls. And they go up in the Everglades, they said, look at this, it's just a bunch of grass and water and swamp. And, that can't be a national park. And they said, but we should do it for biodiversity. This is nationally important as a biodiverse place. And they did.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are glad we did. So, anyway.
Amen.
I think that's
Thanks,
my
Michael.
cue. Yeah, one quick one. Yeah. I'll be around for dinner too if anyone wants to talk. Yes.
Well, a number of us have been working to try to defeat the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership, who are in the room here. But oftentimes when I was talking to other activists about it, they would say, well, that bill is good because it's going to stimulate local economic use of the forest. It's going to, local economic development for local people to do some logging and then turn it into paneling or flooring or, the local towns need that development. So how do you feel about that argument?
Well, I think the argument that the towns need economic development is true. The trouble is their solution is not going to do it. It's just going to put a bunch of money into bureaucrats who are running these agencies and regional planning entities. They would just pay staff, and they just have a bunch of meetings. They'll say, oh yes, you should cut more timber on your land, and people go, why should I? I didn't do it before, and what are you doing to make it more worthwhile? And they say, well, you should do it for economic stimulus. And there's no plan for preserving forests. There's no plan to take it. That thing I talked about, the rearview mirror, the windshield. That's the rearview mirror approach. That's history. That's not coming back, and it shouldn't come back. I'm not against all logging everywhere, but that's not the future of Western Mass. That's not the future. It's not going to ever be big economically. It's killing the goose that lays the golden egg, which is scenic beauty, intact forests, wildlife, recreation. And they don't get it. I think they mean well. They think they're doing, but they just don't have the vision. They don't have a diverse group of people involved in this who really are thinking outside the box. I think it'd be great to have some thinking outside the box for Western Mass. And I think one of the things that will pop up is a national park. That's not the only solution, but that's the kind of thing we ought to be thinking about. Yes, I don't want to keep people from dinner here.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing that I didn't hear you mention in your presentation, which was really, really great, is kind of the explanation for why the state is pushing this biomass thing so much, and why the foresters want it so much is because for the last 50, 60 years or more in Massachusetts, almost all the logging, 80, 90% of the logging that's been happening has been high grading, where they've cut the best and left the junk, left the rest. And now the state and these foresters and the large landowners, they want a market for what they call junk wood, which is all the junk that they've left after they've taken all the cream out of the forest. They're desperate for a market for junk wood, and that's biomass. That's the biomass answer for them. It's the magic bullet to fix their 50 years of high grading. And any honest forester will tell you that they've been high grading Massachusetts forests for the last half century. And they've high graded them to death. And there is no value left in our forests. Even Coles Lumber, which Jones Real Estate is the largest landowner after the state in western Massachusetts, they closed their mill down in North Amherst because they have high graded their forests for so long that they have no value left. But they're a big supporter of biomass. They want a biomass facility in western Massachusetts so that they can continue to cut down the junk that's left and then burn it and get subsidies for the energy. And none of it would happen without subsidies.
But the good thing is it's not really junk. It's only junk if you want it for timber now. The
Commercial.
reality is, it's trees and
That's
herbaceous species and mitochondria. and-
It's not what they call
Fungi
merchantable timber.
Right, and if it's let to recover, it's not going to be the same as the virgin forest because it has been depauperate to some extent. But unfortunately, our forests really can recover amazingly well. So if we don't cut down the so-called junk, it will become a beautiful forest once again. And you're right. This is a critical time because a lot of the trees now are just starting to get to the mature state, which is why they also want to cut mature trees. It's just that there's not enough. Although a lot of them are on state lands, which I think is one of the things driving state land cutting.
Yeah.
And once they get mature, that's when they turn into really good
Right.
carbon sinks, is when they get
Exactly.
mature.
Yes.
Have you seen any studies, carefully constructed studies on the net cost of logging on state land? You mentioned that in the beginning, and I've heard that also. I've seen it at the federal level, but I'm curious about Massachusetts.
I haven't spent a huge amount of time. It really needs a Freedom of Information Act request, but if you look at their regional plans, they do give you basic dollar information which you have to sift through. They don't put it together, and they use different units and whatever, but they are admitting it in their plans.
When you say regional plans, do you mean plans put out by the regional planning agencies?
No, by DCR.
By DCR. So
Yeah, they
it
have to
does
do regional plans for groups of forests. So there are a couple for the Berkshires, several in the Connecticut Valley, and they do these regional plans and they look at the economic, it's all, this is before the fact, but this is their best estimate. So they look at the cost versus what they expect to get from revenue. And if you parse it all and recalculate and use, equalize the units, you can get a basic idea. I mean, I wouldn't swear that it's exact, but it's, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for each, per year for each of these regions. That's subsidies at least. I mean, this is conservative because I don't have all the information. And that's not counting all the other values of forests that are not so easily itemized. For example, there's the social cost of carbon, which is now becoming a mainstream concept, which the Obama administration actually was using and requiring all federal agencies to measure what they're doing based on the social cost of carbon. Trump is setting it aside, but it's going to come back. And what that does is that talks about the cost of floods, costs of more insects and disease, costs of more Lyme disease, the costs of more storms, the shifting forest ecosystems. All of that has a societal cost, and that's never considered in any of this stuff, including by the U.S. Forest Service. So no, we really need. I want to see a statewide assessment because it would be several $1 million at least each year, I'm sure, when you added it all up.
You mean in the,
Lost in the
you
timber
mean in
program.
a loss, as a
Loss.
loss to the taxpayer?
Net loss.
Net loss to the taxpayer.
Yeah, right.
Just as an anecdote, at Wendell State Forest, at that logging job, we did go out with the two big DCR guys and the forester there. And so everybody was asking, arguing actually with these DCR people about why not to log this beautiful 110-year-old white oak forest. I mean, it's phenomenally beautiful. This is really sad. So anyway, so after a while, after only a few people left there, I asked them if there's any argument that we could make to convince them to not log that land at Wendell. And they said, no, there's nothing that you could say to us that would convince us to not log here. And so then I offered to pay, not me personally, but I said, if we paid you the money, the same money that you were going to get, if we paid you to not log this, would you not log it? And they said, no. They said, it's not about the money. So basically, one of my questions for you, Michael, is like,
this insistence upon, even in the face of us saying that we would pay, not that we, that long ago, they weren't making that much money on this logging job, by the way. I think it was 90,000. I can't remember. The money is,
36,000 so
okay,
far.
so that's the money to the town, I think. I don't
No,
know. Okay.
that's the total, that was the total auction price.
Okay, so basically, we do have
So it's
some
like
sense.
8,000 or something like that.
The town is getting a little bit of money, but basically, yes, I know the information's out there about Wendell, about how much money it was gonna get. And so, the thing is that this, this DCR is like sitting, listening to this whole big group of people begging them to not destroy this forest. So my question for you, Michael, is why do you think that this phenomenon is so powerful that, DCR in the face of all this pressure, all this criticism, there's no money involved, you can see they're not, the DCR, they're losing money on these logging jobs. What do you think is, why do you think that this is like a stranglehold on?
The U.S. Forest Service is the same way, and it's because you've got generations of foresters who've been trained to think like the 19th century, where trees are wasted if they're not used, where they, I think most of them, they don't have bad intentions, they really think they're doing the right thing. They're trying, and part of it is they know that people don't want to log their private forests, and they're saying, oh my God, if we use all this wood, the point I made, we use all this wood, yet we're hardly producing any in Massachusetts, and we can't get private landowners to do it, so where are we going to get wood? Oh, the state forests have wood. What if we did it and did it in a sustainable way? Wouldn't that be a good thing? And that's how that's how the national forests were created, and that was their goal in the first place. I would argue it's been perverted big time since then, but I think the goal is outmoded, but I think that's what it is. And so that, to them, they think they're doing a service to society. And we basically need to say, well, that was then, this is now, thank you.
Exactly.
We don't question your motives, but this just, you can help be a part of the future here. You can be a part of, you know forests, you know trees, you get out there, you love forests obviously, or you wouldn't be doing this. And that's what I think we ought to bring them along and show them that this is a better alternative. So to me, these are not, and I know you feel the same way, these are not terrible people, we should be raped and whatever. I really think we should just, honestly say, look, we disagree. This is not the way it is anymore. So.
Well, thank you, Michael. We can continue this conversation at dinner.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.